Hello again. I know I said that I wouldn't produce another Santander video relating to the bank account operated under Collingwood Wealth, but I pasted in an email into the description. I think if you read that, you'll understand why I have done so. As a reminder, Collingwood Wealth was a major part of the wealth tech scandal. It was part of the warnings I gave to the FCA, the accountant, back in July 2021. This account was part of that. This account has seen tens of millions of pounds pass through it. And a few months ago, I started to receive strange emails saying the account didn't have sufficient, despite not having anything to do with Collingwood for since the end of May 2020, May 2021. I'm not actually linked anything to this account, so I can't actually process payments or put any money in or whatever. But despite all that, I started getting these strange emails saying that there was insufficient money in it to pay a standing order to Rycroft Glenton. So I had to, in these emails, there's no way of contacting them. They want all contact to be via an app, and you need a mobile phone associated with the app to be able to do that. And I've never had anything linked to it. Used to receive a payment from it. That was the original purpose of the bank account in Collingwood Wealth, was for John and I to be remunerated via services provided to the regulated entity, which was Virtus LLP, I think. And it was supposed to be remunerated via the business account. So it was all, and there was an accountant to oversee that. But as time went on, unfortunately, it looked like the Collingwood Wealth was operating way beyond that, and hence the concerns that I disclosed. So I got in contact with Collingwood, with Santander, to battle through goodness knows how many rounds of options and so on. And it transpires that this account, eventually there were bars put on it towards the end of 2023. About 5, I think the first bar was 5 months after the FCA woke up and took action against wealth tech. And then there was another bar a few months after, so it was a freezing order and a restraint order effectively. But what, so you still got that 5 months effectively from when they intervened. Remember that I again contacted the FCA in the April 2023, the whistleblower, and said, look, you need to apologise and wake up. What I told you was true. Again, we could have discussed this account in Collingwood in further detail, having realised that they were wrong, but they just put me in a closed loop complaints process. Also, bear in mind that the FCA investigators tried to say there's confidentiality with whistleblowing, but I'd already waived confidentiality. If you notice, I've published the email relating to that in these series of videos. But it's a 5-month window, so I don't know what moved out the account at that time. So when they put the bars on, you would think that the account would have been frozen, held as dormant, shut down. Which I assume what a bar would be. But then it seems that in the summer of this year, the Treasury solicitor scrobbled just over £18,000 from this account as part of the Collingwood Wealth effectively lapsing into it didn't sort of meet Company House criteria and disclosures, so it has strike off notice, and then it's dissolved. So even though the account was barred, you would think, which is very important, because effectively this money could eventually be seen to have been the money of the clients of WealthTech and shouldn't have been returned to them. The Treasury solicitor scrabbled £18,000 odd, I guess, offset the liability of Angela Rayner's severance pay that she received for a job she's since returned to. And that seemed to have triggered insufficient. So, the account was routed by the government, effectively. That seemed to trigger these insufficient funds emails. So when I spoke to them, I said, it's all recorded. I said to them, well, first, could you tell me what your anti-money laundering procedures and mechanisms was, and why wasn't the bank ever suspicious that there were tens of millions of pounds passing through it for an entity that hadn't even got a website, any corporate identity? Did you never think that was suspicious? Did you take any action? Didn't get any answer to that, of course. I don't think I ever will. It got some way into the conversation before they even knew that the account was associated with an alleged fraud. Doing what she eventually spoke to a courts team and so on and so forth, and she said, the standing orders, that they haven't actually been paid since April 2023, which is probably not too unrealistic, because I would imagine the accountant Rycroft Clinton, bearing in mind that I'd warned them about this vehicle again back in 2021, wanted to backpedal from it very, very quickly. And so we're now in a situation where, even after that, I still continue to get these emails, as I've shown on a separate post. So you're beginning to think, what are the systems and controls of this bank? They didn't pick up any suspicious transactions over years. Then it's sort of spitting out emails saying that there's insufficient funds, standing orders, and then I speak to them and say, don't you think this should completely be shut down? And now I've got another email saying that the account is in unarranged overdraft, as you can see in the description. So I don't know, but I can only assume this is because of banking charges. So it seems that Santander is levying charges. I imagine, it could be something else, I'm just surmising, on a barred account that's associated with a large fraud. And you may look at it and think, this is just silly administration and so on and so forth. But is it really? I think that these things are symptomatic of larger problems in the banking system and the wider financial system, actually. Because if you look throughout this account, we had Barclays, who didn't bother to check a FCA register, whether WealthTech had client money permissions, cases, and Cash Bank the same. You have the FCA come out and then they sort of say, we're taking action against this. You didn't do the most basic checks and so on and so forth. But as I've explained, that the whole flaw of the system is the FCA is the WealthTech scandal, and the WealthTech scandal is the FCA, and it's the same pattern with Woodford. These scandals couldn't have happened unless they had failed in their duty as the regulator to protect consumers and to uphold the integrity of the financial system. And it goes back to the theme, I covered it in my last video, context of coordinated coercion I've received. It's this, it doesn't matter, you just invents reality out of narrative. You just put out press releases and take swings at parties that have failed. And when people say, what about you? Surely that if you did your job, these things wouldn't happen. Sort of letting people self-certify when they're applying for direct authorization, and then saying, well, they didn't tell me about a bankruptcy order and things like that. And, where are the questions there? But that's inconvenient. A bit like, the Monroe email, what I've shown you, and I've got more to come on that, is you just ignore the inconvenient bits and just invent a new reality that everything that we've done is fine, everyone else is wrong, and we've fixed it. But there is no mechanism to show that anything's been fixed. There is no accountability. Anyone has held the FCA to and said, look, even of those businesses that you find and obliged to make contributions to clients over their losses, what have you done to fix the system that these things would never happen again? And nothing is done like that. They can sit outside of this parliamentary oversight, just dodge in and out when, do a bit of this and that when they're called in just to have a chat about something that may be of interest here and there. But the real issues, there's never any evidence that they're fixed. And as I've said, in terms of what we look at, the wider, if you look, I'm talking generically here, the fraud, the UK is a major centre for fraud and money laundering, and it relates to slackness of the banking system, of which I've shown you continued evidence of that. It isn't just, this is just things that would embarrass even a bank in what we would look at frontier market. Slackness in the banking system and other financial institutions, and this smaller companies exemption and micro accounts regime. Put those two together, and you've got a centre that's rife for crime, financial crime, and it still carries on. And incidentally, the businesses, I've said the businesses you see that clearly not quite right, shall we say, that appear here, there, and everywhere. They all take advantage of these weaknesses, and they continue. But anyway, I shall have to sadly devote more time to try to speak to Santander, or in one capacity or another, because it seems that even though this account's barred, even though it's known fully that it's part of a fraud case, suspected fraud case, tens of millions of pounds have passed through it, seemingly incapable of shutting it down, and seems that I potentially, despite having nothing to do with the account for years, only ever received money for it and whatever, never have no mechanism to put money in, even if it was appropriate, that I could be on the hook for, or we could be on the hook. I assume John's still associated with it somewhere. That's what they said actually on the call he is. We could be on the hook for overdraft charging. Well, who do we blame? Do we blame Santander? Do we blame the Treasury solicitor for scrobbling the account to fund Angela Rayner's severance pay? Or do we blame the FCA? I would say it's indicative of a whole system that's breaking down, institutions that are failing. And it's a Western thing. It's around the world. Look at the Americans and in Iran with the Abraham Lincoln, the inability to subdue Iran, who are far smaller in terms of economy and military prowess. Look at the situation in Ukraine, the scandals coming out the Zelensky regime. The Russians are still at great cost themselves, albeit making advances to Ukraine. There's no plan for it. Really, what should be a plan is for peace. Stop the dying. Find a way that both sides can work together, stop each other's people dying, and find a way to live together peacefully, Europe and Russia. But no, we don't. Systems fail and they'll continue to fail. That's what happens. Look at Tacitus, Plutarch, Cicero. When if we take the West as an empire-ish, led by the US, when these systems start to fail, they become more indebted, they become more corrupt, they become more incompetent, they become more degenerate. And that's really what we're seeing. And these things are all connected. Take care. Bye.